Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. So the last two beers that I've had from this brewery have been really interesting. They both came under the kind of IPA umbrella, I guess we could say, but the one that we're going to try today is from the dark end of the spectrum. It's a big beast of a beer, and I have to say I'm very, very curious to see how it turns out. This brewery have also been releasing quite a few beers over here in Sweden over the last little while, so it's nice to return to them again after a good few months. So fingers crossed this is another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this one we are going to go to the Midwest. We're going to go to the state of Illinois and a place called Normal, which is next to Bloomington. It's in the northern part of Bloomington, right in the centre of the state, almost to the southwest of Chicago. Awesome beer city, incidentally, that you need to check out if you're into your craft beers. But we're going to have a look at my third beer from Destihl Brewing Company. So this beer is one of their Dosvidanyas. It's the rye barrel edition. It comes in at 13.6% ABV, and this one is a rye whiskey barrel aged Russian style Imperial Stout, as they're calling it. So yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out. It's not that often over here in Europe that you find a rye whiskey barrel aged Imperial Stout, and that was the main reason why I bought this one, of course. But we got this beer here in Sweden as part of the Tillfälligt assortment through Systembolaget, I believe on the 6th of July 2021. And yeah, that was the main reason why I picked this one up. You don't find too many rye whiskey barrel aged things over here. Rye whiskey is not such a big thing in Europe. Of course, most whiskey drinkers in Scotland will be into Scotch, of course. I'm being Scottish myself. I haven't actually tried too many American bourbons or American rye whiskies. That is something that I do need to explore a little bit in the future. But I thought this one just sounded like a very, very interesting beer. It's a little bit pricey, but yeah, you've got to treat yourself every so often, and I enjoyed the last couple of beers that I had from this brewery. So like I say, fingers crossed this is another good one, and I have to say, very, very curious to see what this has in store for us. A 13.6% rye whiskey barrel aged Russian Imperial Stout. So yeah, let's crack on with the review then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from the Destihl Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add some more videos to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for a beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the American beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Destihl Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So, Destihl Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Normal in Illinois, and the company was founded back in 2005 by Matt and Lynn Potts. So, Matt began homebrewing back in 1995 after Lynn bought him a 5-gallon homebrewing kit for Christmas, and he continued to experiment over the years, and he had often toyed with the idea of starting his own brewery because his beers were getting very good feedback. But eventually, he drew up a business plan, and then in 2001 they opened their first brew pub, and this was called Elmwood Brewing Company. But Matt was approached later on about opening up another brew pub by a developer, and they decided that they were going to go for this. So in 2007 they brought in Jason Bratchett and Troy and Laurie Nelson to join the team and help run the brew pub, and this opened in November of 2007. Over the following years they did well, and then in 2011 they opened a second location in Champaign in Illinois, and following this they focused on expanding the brewing operations. So they opened a new production facility at the General Electric warehouses in Bloomington in Illinois, and they began production there in mid-2013. But they continued to expand there, and they outgrew this facility fairly quickly, and so they invested in a new $15 million facility in Normal in Illinois, and this features a large beer hall. It houses the company corporate offices, and this is the main operations, the main base of operations today, I guess we could say. And they've been expanding their exports over the last few years, hence why we're getting a number of their beers over here in Sweden. But as of July 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 590 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And yeah, they seem to do some very nice stuff, at least in my experience. But the beers are actually fairly cheap over here as well. I think the IPAs that I had from them before were cheaper than some of the Swedish brewed ones that we'd had. So that is quite interesting. They must be producing quite a bit of volume over there actually, but maybe this is a place I can go and check out at some point in the future. I've been to Chicago in recent years, so I need to go there again and have a little look, but it would be kind of cool to go and explore Indiana a little bit more and have a look at some, Illinois I should say, not Indiana. I should go and explore Illinois a little bit more over the coming years and see what other stuff they have to offer. But yeah, that was all the information I was really able to find on Destihl Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this beer then. That is it for your history section. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork of this one then before we open it up. As you can see, the artwork on this is very, very nice. There you can see the Russian Matryoshka doll, which is very nice. I actually thought she was holding a gun or something when I first looked at it, but no, it's a key, so a little bit more of a religious symbol than an AK-47 or whatever. But yeah, there you can see the Destihl Brewery symbol. And as I said, this one, 13.6%. Rye whiskey barrel aged Russian Imperial Stout. It says on the side here, like a Russian Matryoshka or nesting doll, the secret of Dosvidanya Russian Imperial Stout lies tied up in her dark, mysterious and elaborate wooden layers. We said Dosvidanya or goodbye to the hidden soul of this oak rye whiskey barrel aged beer for several months before revealing its rich, robust and roasty maltness that finishes dry with a pleasant spiciness from the barrel and added rye. Oh, so they've added a bit of rye into this one then. But please consume slowly and enjoy. Boycott bland. Yeah, I do like that. But yeah, like I say, 13.6% ABV this one, so it is a bit of a monster. And yeah, this is the 2020 vintage as well, apparently. That is worth pointing out. But this can is 473 millilitres, 1 American pint, and I think I paid 120, maybe 130 Swedish krona for this. So that translates to roughly 13 euros. That'll be, so 13 euros is roughly about £11 sterling, and I guess maybe about $15, something like that, for one can. So yeah, a little bit expensive this one, but this honestly was one of those beers that I looked at and I thought, you know, fuck it, why not? But yeah, as I say, you do not come across all that many rye whiskey barrel aged Imperial Stouts here in Europe. So yeah, that was the other thing that attracted me to it as well. But yeah, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Black top on the can, of course, which is quite nice, but we'll get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. You can feel the weight in this can incidentally as well. This is a big dense beast of a beer, and I have to say I'm quite curious about the mouthfeel in this one. As I've explained in other reviews that I've done recently, I've never found, oh, losing a little bit of the beer there, don't know what I did, but yeah, as I've explained in other Imperial Stout reviews that I've done in recent years, one of the things I've found is that the a lot of breweries don't really compete with the Scandinavian breweries on Imperial Stouts in terms of mouthfeel, if that makes sense. I'm yet to find foreign breweries that can compete with the Scandinavian breweries in terms of mouthfeel of these big Imperial Stouts. And what you'll often find is that they're a bit lighter in mouthfeel, but you still get the same big flavours from them. I've actually spilt a fair wee bit of that. I need to sort that after the review, but anyway, we'll focus on the beer just now. Don't know how I did that there, but yeah, you will find, at least I found in my experience, you know, the Danish, the Swedish, the Norwegian breweries, it's very, very difficult to beat the mouthfeels that these guys have in terms of the Imperial Stouts, of course. Even the American ones tend to feel a little bit lighter, but still packed with flavour, of course. So we'll see how that goes in this one, especially. You have to remember, when this is barrel aged, quite often you sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel of the beer to get all these kind of lovely infused flavours, of course. But anyway, onto the beer itself then. So as you can see, this beer is poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour, which is what you would expect from an Imperial Stout, especially a Russian Imperial Stout. If we hold the beer up to the light, it's pretty much black as night. You know, it's got a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it, but yeah, the beer is pretty much as dark as they come. So that is not surprising at all when you consider what style this beer is. That is, you know, par for the course, I guess you could say. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on, one, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour of your beer. Then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. So a big Imperial Stout like this is probably going to undergo a wort boil of about 5 hours or something like that. These beers tend to have big long wort boils, especially if they're going to use them for barrel aging, because quite often they'll brew them to be thicker and darker for these kind of things. But when it comes to the other things that can affect it, you know, barrel aging and adjuncts can of course affect the colour of the beer as well, but not as much. You know, in terms of the Imperial Stouts, that's not going to affect them as much in terms of the colour compared to other things. But yeah, it goes together quite nicely, this one, and there's nothing really surprising about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. But there's 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. You can see 1 or 2 little things coming up towards the surface there. The head, of course, disappeared pretty much right away on this one when we poured it. But when it's 13.6%, you'd expect that. The thing that can really help stouts maintain a little bit of head is wheat, but I don't think there's too much wheat in this beer, considering you know, it's a Russian Imperial Stout. They don't tend to have too much wheat in them. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one and see how we get on. Nothing surprising about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's go and have a look at the aroma. And I'll say straight away, this is an absolute monster. You can smell that right away with it. Yeah. That's a beautiful, beautiful smelling beer. Straight away with this one. I have to admit, I think if I was to smell this straight off the bat without knowing what it was, I think I would struggle to tell you that that was barrel aged, because usually with, you know, the barrel aging and stuff, you usually get a lot of you know, you can sort of smell that the beer's a little bit lighter and it comes across as a little bit more woody and infused, but this one actually has a kind of quite punchy aroma to it. So that's a really interesting point about this one. On first impression, quite a big punchy aroma, I would say. But yeah, on the nose of this one, this is just a big beautiful beer. You can smell straight away with this that this has got a very long wort boil, I think, and of course the more that you smell of it and the more that your nose adjusts, you do start to get those kind of more subtle undertones that you would expect of a big barrel aged beer. So yeah, this is something else. This is crazy. I'm going to say straight away, I think this is probably worth the 130 crowns that I paid for it. One of the more expensive beers I've bought in recent times. And as I say, it was just a bugger at why not moment. But yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy this for sure. But yeah, straight away with this one, you've got some really interesting things going on. So you can smell the big sort of brown rye bready backbone of this. It's got a lovely kind of woody, you do get a bit of woody undertone to it, but I think that takes a little while to come out because the beer comes across as like a big oily kind of syrupy sort of thing in the beginning. But yeah, backbone of this beer is lovely and kind of, it's got a sort of lovely smooth woody character to it, which I think is very, very nice. You can smell that in there, that sort of American oak. You do get a little bit of the kind of American bourbon type thing. I don't know, do they call it a rye whiskey or a rye bourbon? I'm not 100% sure. But to me, as a Scot, I've always found that the American whiskies, the American bourbons, tend to be a lot sweeter than the Scottish ones. The Scottish ones are a bit more kind of grainy and toasty in a sense, but the American ones are a bit sweeter and, you know, more brown sugary in a sense. So you can smell that lovely kind of oaky, woody backbone to the beer. You can smell a little bit of that sort of bourbony character to it. Then on top of that, you get this big, sweet, brown bready sort of thing. And, you know, it always reminds me of the kind of German rye breads that I used to eat when I lived in Heidelberg down in Germany. I loved the German bakeries. I miss them quite a lot. But yeah, you can smell that in this beer. It's got the lovely kind of woody bourbon barrel aged type things to it, but then it's got a, you know, that brown rye bready sort of thing. So I really like how this beer goes about its business on that side of things. The malty base in this one is something else, and this is where the vast majority of the complexity in this beer lies. But yeah, on top of the kind of brown bready side of things, you've got a mix of big, thick, chocolatey character and, you know, heavily caramelized brown sugars. You can tell from just the sheer thickness of the brown sugars in this beer how much you can tell how much how long the wort boil in this is. But yeah, I think it comes across really, really nicely. So where do we start with this? Where do we start with this beer? As I say, you get that massive kind of chocolatey backbone to it. So you can smell there's a sort of 70-ish% cocoa chocolate in this one. You can certainly smell that. There's one or two little milky chocolatey elements in there too, which I really like. But on top of that, you get the big highly treaclized, caramelized brown sugars in there, and those really resonate into the end of the beer. You do get a wee bit of a sweet caramel, a little bit of a biscuity kind of thing out of it as well. But yeah, I really, really like how this beer goes about its business. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me in terms of the aroma of this one. It's almost got a wee bit of a kind of like soy saucy type aroma to it as well, which is quite interesting. But yeah, woody, bourbon barrel-y kind of backbone to it, big rye bready notes, good bit of a kind of 70% kind of cocoa chocolate, then those big brown sugary elements there, a lot of kind of treacle molasses sort of thing, sweeter caramel, and a wee bit of a kind of biscuity note to it also. But yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think comes across very, very nicely. So big thumbs up to Destihl Brewery for the malty kind of barrel-aged backbone of this one. Let's kind of look at the hoppy side of the beer and things kind of quickly. But yeah, the vast majority of this for this beer is all about the big malty side of things. You do get a little bit of hoppy character to this one. You can smell a wee touch of earthiness in there. There is a little bit of a kind of floral aromaticity lingering over it and a wee bit of grassiness. But remember, when this is a barrel-aged Imperial Stout, and Imperial Stout normally is not the most hop-forward of styles. When it's barrel-aged, of course, a lot of the hoppy character will drop out of it. And then again, you also have the fact that this beer's been transported to Sweden. It's probably been sitting for a little while before it's been released through Systembolaget, and yeah, but you still actually get a good little bit of you still get a nice little bit of hoppy character out of this one, a bit of earthiness, wee bit of floral character, nice little bit of a lighter kind of grassy sort of thing. And yeah, I like how this I do like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. But on the fruity side of the beer, it's quite interesting. There's a few interesting little points here. So with that, you can smell it's got a wee bit of an almost cakey aroma to it. I forgot to say that earlier. It does have a wee bit of a kind of cakey sort of chocolate brownie element to it, this beer, in a sense. But on the fruity side of things, I would say a little bit kind of blackberry. You do get a little bit of a you do get a wee bit of a raisiny note out of this one. Wee bit of a raisin, a little bit of a kind of figgy note underneath, and you also get a wee bit of a kind of black curranty type vibe to this beer as well. So I really like how that goes together in this beer. So yeah, the aroma of this one, I think, is really nice. The fruity side of the beer takes a bit of a back seat to the other things, but yeah, a little bit of raisin, a little bit of a kind of drier, kind of drier pruny type thing underneath, and a wee bit of a figgy black curranty element to it as well. But the aroma of this is absolutely lovely. Definitely take a little bit of time to ponder that over before you actually taste this beer. But I think on that note, and having spilt a little bit on my my little stand here, I think we should have a taste of this one. So yeah, this is the Dosvidanya, a rye whiskey barrel aged Russian Imperial Stout, coming in at 13.6% ABV from Destihl Brewing Company in Normal, Illinois. Smells like an absolute beast. I hope it tastes like that as well. But let's go for it. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's a bit of a monster. It really is. I'm going to be sitting sipping on this for a few hours. I was in the mood for an Imperial Stout this evening, and this one is certainly going to be sipped on for the next couple of hours. But yeah, this is lovely. First impression of it is beautiful, big smoothness. Just lovely big smoothness to it. And you do get, you know, when they're talking about a gentle spice in this one, when you go into the aftertaste, it certainly does deliver on that. And I'm just going to say big thumbs up to Destihl Brewery for this one. Yeah, this is worth trying, definitely. And I'll say that, as I say, I paid 129 Swedish kronor for this. And to be fair, I think if you had something equivalent from the likes of Stigbergets, I'm sure I've paid roughly about the same for a Stigbergets bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout. So, you know, you can't really, I think, you can't really complain about the price for this one, because that would be the one thing that stands out. At 129 kroners, which I'm pretty sure is what I paid for it, it would stand out on the price a little bit. But when Stigbergets released a bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout, you can't really knock this one. That's actually a very good price, I think, for an American imported you know, barrel aged Imperial Stout. So that's another thing. But I think these guys can get away with that a little bit because of the volume that they can brew. And I have noticed that their beers are a wee bit cheaper compared to some of the other American things, but they certainly don't lack in quality. You have to say that about them. So yeah, it's interesting for sure. I guess maybe they've maybe when they've invested in such a big facility and stuff, they've got a lot more capacity to export and things, and as long as they break even with that, eventually they'll gain. So yeah, that's an interesting point to think about this brewery from the business side of things. But they've produced a lovely, lovely beer with this, so let's try and break the flavour down and explain it to you a little bit better. So yeah, straight away with this beer then, you can feel that nice, smooth, woody backbone to this one. That goes right across the middle of your palate. On top of that, you get a little bit of the kind of brown sugary elements in there, and that is typical, as I say, of the American bourbons and the American whiskies. I do need to try a few more American bourbons and things like that, and American rye whiskies when I'm over in the States. My friend Dave, of course, I'm sure will set me up with that at some stage. But on top of the woody notes in this beer, you can certainly feel that sort of brown sugary kind of layer there, but that woody backbone is the base of the middle third and the back third of your palate. But yeah, when you move into the front half of that middle third of your tongue, oh, my alarms are going off again. There we go. Need to keep that here, so it'll probably do it again. But yeah, you can feel that lovely, as I say, smooth woody backbone to the beer, the kind of brown sugary layer sitting on top of it, and then in the front half of that middle third of your palate, you get a nice, as I say, you get a lovely kind of little bit of a nutty character out of it, and that's quite minimal though. But on top of that kind of layer, you can feel that big rye, brown bready sort of thing, and both these things cover both the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. Sitting on top of the rye bread layer, you get the chocolate. Now the chocolate does come across a bit differently in the flavour to how it does in the aroma, I would say. So when you go to the back half of that middle third of your palate, you can feel there's quite a high bitterness to the cocoa in this beer. You know, it comes across like a sort of 70-80% cocoa beer, this one. Or cocoa chocolate, I should say. So you get quite a high bitterness chocolate on that back half of the front third of your palate. But as you often get, when you move forward in that middle third of your palate, the bitterness kind of fades away a little bit, and it almost does become a little bit more milky. So you're going from like a sort of 70% cocoa chocolate, maybe down to about a sort of 50% cocoa chocolate. I wouldn't say it goes quite into the 40, because that's when you're starting to get into the really milky chocolatey notes. But yeah, you can feel that the bitterness of the chocolate just drops off. But remember, bitter flavours come out at the back of the palate, sweeter flavours tend to come out more towards the front. But yeah, you've got that dry sort of almost like chocolate powdery sort of thing sitting on top of the rye bready layer in this beer. On top of that, of course, that's where you get the big oily brown sugars out of this one, So yeah, let's focus on that now. So you can feel that on top of that, you get those I can't think silky and sort of leathery is a good descriptor for the way these brown sugars come across, but you can feel that big silky brown sugary element just sitting on top there. It's almost like you've got an oval right in the middle of your palate, and you just feel everything going together. So right in the dead centre of that, you've got that highly concentrated brown sugary sort of thing. And as you move further out from that, you can just feel that it gets a little touch more kind of toasty and light. You almost get a wee bit of a kind of caramel wafery note out of this. But then as you move out towards the very edges of your palate, there's a sweet caramel in there, and there's a little bit of a more kind of toasty, there's a little bit of a more kind of, how would we say, a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to this one. So the way that the brown sugars in this beer come out are really interesting, but you can tell straight away that this beer is really, the wort boil on this one must have been very, very long, at least 5 hours or something. And I'm wondering, when I feel the flavour of this beer and I feel how it goes together, I do wonder if there are a wee bit of, there's some oats in this one, but apparently there's not. It just says, yeah, corn malt, veta malt and rog malt. So that is, that's, yeah, basically barley malt, wheat malt and rye malt in this one. But it does actually feel this level of smoothness that you get out of this beer. It does give the impression of a little bit of oat or oatmeal. So yeah, that's kind of interesting too. But I think that covers the middle third of the palate quite well in this one, but it's very, very layered, as we say. Let's focus on the back third of the palate for a little while then. But as you go into that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you feel a little bit of a bready build-up. You can feel a little bit more of a kind of concentrated, bread crusty, grainy kind of thing to the beer. But then the base of that, back third of your palate, you can feel a nice, you can feel that nice sort of kind of, again, the sort of woody backbone into the beer. You can feel the kind of rye bread on top, and there's a wee bit of a more kind of bitter, toasty, grainy, bread crusty sort of thing on the back. But then on top of that back third of your palate, you can feel the sort of taller, yeasty. You can feel the taller, yeasty elements kind of coming out of the beer as well. So the flavour feels a little bit taller, I should say, but you get the more airy, yeasty elements there. I think the alcohol's going to my head with this one, 13.6%. This is a monster. Pardon me. But yeah, when you start from the back of the palate on this beer, you can feel that the flavour feels a little bit taller, but as you move further forward, it just condenses down a little bit. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it feels a little bit more kind of squashed together in a sense. So yeah, it feels a little bit more condensed there. But in terms of the flavour profile you get of this one, this is very nice, and this is definitely one of the thicker American Russian Imperial Stouts that I've come across. And this one, in fairness, could compete, I think, with some of the Scandinavian ones that I've had. So yeah, need to think about that a little bit then. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, I think we've covered the malty and barrel aged backbone of this beer as much as we can for the moment. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things with this beer then. So back corners of the palate, you get a nice little bit of earthiness out of the beer, and that's for sure, and that kind of builds a good bridge with the rye. But as you move further forward, it's a little bit more herbal. Then as you go towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it has a little bit of floral aromaticity. Remember, most of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this beer because it's barrel aged, and again, Russian Imperial Stouts are not the most hoppy of beer styles. But yeah, you do get a little bit of floral aromaticity there on the front corners of the palate. Round the front curve of the tongue, it's distinctly lighter and more grassy, and there's a wee bit of a kind of citrusy zestiness to the beer as well, which I very much enjoy. But on the front third of your palate, then you can feel you can pick up some really interesting things going on here. But the front third of your palate is where you're going to get the fruity elements out of the beer. But yeah, on that front third of your palate, then you can feel a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. You get a little bit more of a kind of intense bread crusty element, maybe a little bit of a kind of chocolate brownie type vibe to the beer. Absolutely, you can feel that. And then the base of that front third of your palate, again, you can get a little bit of the kind of woody, kind of whiskey layers underneath, but then you get a wee bit of the kind of sort of brown bready and the kind of almost cakey notes there. And on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer in this one. The fruity notes in this beer, I think, are actually quite straightforward. There's a little bit of raisin in there for sure. So yeah, when you take the beer in, it's got a little bit of a kind of raisiny element to it on top of that. But then underneath that, you get a little bit of a juicy kind of pruny note. There's a wee bit of a kind of sultana type quality to it as you move further forward. So sultanas, of course, the dried white green grapey notes to it. You get maybe dates is a good descriptor for it, actually, come to think of it. But yeah, you get a bit of a dried fruit quality in the back half of that front third of your palate. Then as you move into the front half of the front third of your tongue, that's when you get the more kind of juicy notes out of it. There's a little bit of fig in there, a little bit of blackcurrant, and a kind of more sweeter, rounder, oily blackberry to this beer. So yeah, that's a really interesting note about this. But the fruity notes for me come across as kind of quite dried fruity in nature. But yeah, I think the fruit that kind of covers the flavour profile of this beer in a lot of ways. A nice dried fruity end to it. But yeah, on that note, we should round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So mouthfeel overall, definitely a full-bodied beer. Carbonation is very, very smooth in this one. It's a big, thick, almost creamy sort of thing. So big and creamy and oily. In a sense, I could say it's a very, very sort of thick beer, this one. There's no doubt in my mind about that. In terms of IBUs and things, I actually don't know with this one. It could sort of sit around the kind of 50 IBU mark. You get a bit of spiciness out of it, but that's the question is with this beer, where is the line between the sort of spiciness and the bitterness? That's difficult to say, but it comes across as if it's maybe like a sort of 50-ish, 50 or 60 IBU beer, this one. But again, this is a grey area because of the spicy, the kind of spicy, yeah, the sort of spicy, bready, rye kind of leaning thing, and the more hoppy side of the beer. So that's a bit of a grey area. But as we said, the malt base is very layered, woody, kind of barrel agey notes, big bready notes, chocolatey kind of dryness if you like, and then big brown sugars. And on the fruity side of the beer, it's quite oily in that sense, but you've got a lot of dried fruity character to this one. But what you can take away from this review is that this is an awesome, awesome beer. I don't regret paying €13 for the can, basically. And I certainly, I don't know if I would drink it again. I think this is a sort of maybe once in a lifetime beer, if you say that. It's an experience beer. But yeah, I've certainly enjoyed the experience that I've had of this one so far. You can see I haven't drunk that much of it, but I can feel it kind of going to my head already. But yeah, awesome beer from Destihl Brewery, and it certainly makes me curious about some of the other beers they've got. I'd love to try something a bit more brown sugary orientated, like a Scotch ale or a Belgian quadruple or something like that. And no doubt with the size of this brewery, they have done that at some stage. But I think we can round off this review there then. So this one is the Dosvidanya Rye Barrel Edition, Rye Whiskey Barrel Aged Russian Imperial Stout at 13.6% ABV from Destihl Brewery over in Normal in Illinois, in the centre, in the Midwest of the US, I should say. An awesome beer, this, and definitely, I think this could potentially be the thickest American Imperial Stout that I've come across so far. So maybe I have to think about that statement where I always say, you know, it's very difficult to beat the Scandinavian breweries in terms of thickness on Imperial Stouts. But an awesome beer, this one, and I would recommend that you have a go at this if you get the chance. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Destihl Brewery. Pardon me, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. As I say, I want something a bit more brown sugary next time, but this was awesome. So check out this brewery, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you soon. Yeah, the Dosvidanya Rye Barrel Edition, 13.6% rye whiskey barrel aged Russian Imperial Stout from Destihl Brewery, Destihl Brewing Company in Normal, Illinois, over in America. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.